Welcome everybody. We are in an unprecedented and a fairly precarious position. It's created stress and strains for all of us, tremendous uncertainty, and it's crippled a lot of businesses of all kinds. No one is going untouched here. We understand the need for immediate action. We're here to help. So I am John Grimm. I am with Jumpstart. I'm a CFO in residence. Prior to Jumpstart, I was an entrepreneur in residence at Youngstown Business Incubator. And prior to that, I was CFO and COO and a primary investor in a software company called Notice. That was my second startup. And so I've gone through many of the pains of what many entrepreneurs go through. Even though some startups end up doing well, you never go through them without having some trouble. We have 4 panelists here today, and I would like to introduce them all, and I would like all of you to maybe talk about yourselves for about 2 minutes, like who you are and why you're here. And I will start with Jasmine.
My name is Jasmine Dixon. I am the capital advisor for ECDI. I'm also the capital access manager for Kiva program here in Cleveland market. My background initially was in banking. I did business banking for about 6 years. My clients were $1 million of revenue or higher. I also have a master's degree in accounting, and I am currently working to become a certified financial planner. So finance, personal business is what I do day in and day out. Not an accountant, so appreciate the accountants out there. Not for me, but appreciate you guys. And yeah, I'm here because I work with a lot of our clients, both in the startup phase, both in existing business phase, just helping them navigate the system and figure out how to grow their businesses.
All right, thank you, Jasmine. Let's move over to George.
Good morning. George Pimentel. I'm an accountant, and I own small business accounting services. My background, I used to be the SBDC director at the HBC, and today I'm still a consultant and a business advisor with the Hispanic Business Administration. My experience is working with small businesses from $10,000 up to $10 million, and we work on creating growth plans and see how we can help all of the businesses go through this difficult time.
Thank you, George. For anybody that doesn't know out there, HBC is the Hispanic Business Center in Cleveland. Let's move over to Kim, please.
Good morning. I'm Kimberly Spades. I'm the controller for the Centers for Families and Children and Circle Health Services. I am also the owner of Spades Accounting and Bookkeeping Services. And unlike Jasmine, I do love accounting. And I have a bachelor's and a master's. I'm actually working on a second master's in auditing. And most of my background has been in not-for-profits. And today I hope to assist entrepreneurs who are going through these tough times and help them appreciate the time that they have now to just really, sit back and, look at their business models, reevaluate their business plans, and also develop a continuity plan. So you may have one, you may not have one, but this is a perfect time to be thinking about that.
Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate that. And last is Greg Friedman.
Hi there, I'm Greg Friedman. I'm a practicing CPA. I'm also a chartered global management accountant with international experience. My primary background is banking, finance, nonprofits, small business startups. I've survived 2 IPOs. I'm currently operating my own consulting business part-time, and I'm also a SCORE volunteer. And a SCORE, we're the Service Corps of Retired Executives, and it's a nonprofit subsidiary of the SBA, so I'm pretty wired with the SBA. And so we provide free mentoring services to startup companies on a confidential basis. And the reason I'm here is to assist participants in trying to understand some of the complex impacts of COVID-19. And my most important theme for today is to facilitate small business survival and startups.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks to all four of you for joining us today. We very much appreciate this, as does the audience, I'm sure, in these tough times. So, you know, we're going to go through a bunch of the key factors. You know, on a P&L, you have revenue and expenses. We'll be talking about revenue and expenses. You know, how can you maximize revenue and cash in you know, a situation like this, and what can you do with expenses? The key objectives for any business at this point is to preserve and extend cash, especially if you have deteriorating revenue. We want to keep businesses running. We want to keep customers happy. We want to keep employees happy. And if you have investors, keep the investors happy. So, Greg, I'm going to start with you. Could you just talk a little bit about what it's important for businesses to do today in terms of communication?
Well, one of the key things that they need to do is that a multitude of business out there can qualify for the SBA 7A loan. And that's a different type of beast, because the way you do it is you go through your own personal financial or business financial institution. So you want to make sure that you keep communications open with your local financial institution, and give them a heads up that you most likely will be planning to file an application for relief under the SBA 7A loan. And that's the loan that provides funding to maintain your current employee base, and also to pay leases or rents or mortgages on your business property, and also to pay utilities.
Thank you, Greg. Jasmine, at ECDI, do you have any thoughts on, you know, communication and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge for anyone who's related to your business, whether it be partners that you work with, employees, customers, to understand the steps that you are taking and, you know, keeping the business running. And no one should be left out of the loop. When people don't know what's going on, they stop engaging, they start worrying, all kinds of things. So it's just huge to keep that line consistent and open, and let people know that you have a plan in place for keeping, you know, everything moving.
And George, do you have anything to add to the communication?
Yes, actually, I'm working with some clients on communicating with suppliers. If you ordered some products and you know that you're not going to use it, communicate with your suppliers. Make sure, try to get those products, send them back, so you don't have that accounts payable in this time. They should be able to work with you, because if you don't have the money to pay it, it doesn't do any good to the suppliers having the product out and not being able to collect. So that's something that I encourage all of the small business owners. If you ordered products, talk to your suppliers and see if you can get those back.
Kimberly, anything to add on this important topic of communication?
Yes, so at the centers, we have an update that goes out from our interim CEO. We also direct our staff to our website, which we update with any new information that's coming out from the governor or the president. And so again, it's very important that we communicate with our teams, our vendors, if we're going to be late on payments, that we let them know not to expect it. So we've been doing that also.
The other thing I do want to say too, before we move on, is that I think a lot of people are nervous about having conversations with their landlords because they think that they're not going to be heard. And that's a big issue right now. Everyone knows what's going on. Have that conversation with your landlord, especially have that conversation with your creditors. Don't think that they just, oh, they don't care, they just want to get paid. communicate to everyone.
Another good business practice right now is management by walking around. Walk around, talk to your employees, ask them what their concerns are to reassure them that you're doing things like applying for a 7A loan or things like that, so they're confident about their work position.
We're going to talk about the loans in a little bit, but the question came up, and since we're on it, is the 7A loan just mentioned different from the disaster relief loan?
They're two separate
So,
programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a EILD loan, which is a standard SBA loan, which can take 6 to 8 weeks to process. And then you have this emergency loan, which is the SBA 7A loan, which is the one that covers payroll, leases, rents,
Salary.
utilities, and things like that. So they're two separate programs. The EILD loan, you go through SBA, but for a quicker process for the S7A loan, you go through your existing banking relationship with your local banker.
All right, and we'll come back to this in a little bit because I know this is an important topic. What I'd like to move to now is let's kind of discuss what companies can do to look for boosting revenue and boosting cash. You know, what can a business do? I've got some businesses that I'm an advisor to that are literally looking for alternative forms of revenue because the form of revenue they had basically deteriorated in a very quick way. George, you want to chime in on that, on some of the businesses you're seeing at HBC?
Most of the businesses I'm seeing lately, they're in the food industry. And as you know, as we all know, they have been hit very hard. And right now, what they're working on is reducing the operating hours and just incorporating the delivery part. I know DoorDash is giving a grace on for free for the month of April. And most of my clients are taking advantage of this service. Some of them have reduced their profit, their income, but surprising, there were some that didn't have any idea that doing delivery will increase their profit, or they had no interest on doing it. And by being forced by this situation, it have opened their eyes, and they're kind of at 90% of what they used to do, having the sit down.
Kimberly, anything to add here?
I would just say, obviously,
Okay.
for some industries, it's difficult to, either deliver or do provide certain services online. But definitely, I can see where there's a lot of talk of how entrepreneurs can transition to online sales. So that's, really big right now. Just trying to, for entrepreneurs to try to figure out how to do that.
What are you seeing businesses doing just to literally cover fixed cost via cash and revenue? I mean, I hope everyone understands the difference between revenue and cash. You get revenue and it converts to cash at some point. Cash is really king. So do you have anything you would want to add there? And I'd like to start with Jasmine.
I think right now everyone's go-to is all of these COVID-19 recovery loans that everyone is coming out with. And there are so many options right now, no matter where you are on the spectrum. There are people who have perfect credit, perfect history, and can go through the SBA and get their funding. They have a variety of options. And then there are people who may have some challenges in certain areas who can go through like the ECDI or HFLA or Kiva. So I think the first thing that people need to look at is these capital opportunities, then start to figure out how they can pivot from a revenue perspective. But I would secure getting some lending, because the majority of them are allowing them to have a grace period. So they're not in a position where they necessarily have to pay back right away. It's just to keep them afloat.
Thank you, Greg. Being, from the banking industry, would you advise clients to go to their banks at this point, and if they've got open credit lines, drawing down on maybe any remaining availability that they have?
Yeah, but that would not be my first choice. You need to look at reducing non-essential expenses. And first, so if there's some things you can defer, if you can get extended payments from your creditors, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, that's a good thing to do. If you're looking for a 7A loan, you're going to go into your banker anyway. But I would talk to the banker one way or the other, whether you're applying for 7A or not, to see what the best way to maybe act on a line of credit would be. And I wouldn't necessarily draw down on a line of credit if I can get relief through a 7A loan, which is supposed to be a 2 or 3 week process. So you might do a short-term drawdown on your line of credit, but you don't want to take it to the max, that's for sure. You have to have reserves out there because it's going to be a long-term recovery.
And I just want to add,
Hi, George.
even if you don't need the loan right now, it is a good idea to start the process because we don't know how long this emergency will stay. So let's just be prepared and be proactive. If you have the cash right now, you don't have the rush to get a loan, but start working on it, and that's going to be the plan for the long term.
So I don't know who's the best to answer this question. We have another audience question that's come up, and that is, my husband and I own 3 different businesses, and they want to know if each one can apply for what I think is the 7A, which is the PPP loan.
Yeah, so we have meetings with the SBA constantly. We had a meeting with them a couple of days ago, and he instructed that if there are different NICS codes, different EINs, different businesses, to apply separately.
Somebody asked, can we talk about the alternatives to the SBA 7A loans? Are there alternatives?
Mm-hmm. There are organizations like I said, ECDI, there's HFLA, there's the PPP Loan. I think everyone should try to go for the EIDL loan because, like I said, if you get denied, you still get the opportunity to get the advance, which is the grant. But there are some people who are just not going to be able to get the SBA EIDL loan just because of the circumstances that they're in. So I would look at other organizations, no different as if you would if we weren't in the middle of a crisis, and look at ECDI and look at some of the other options as well.
Also, if you're a member of an industry organization, so if you're in a like a group of restaurateur organizations or things like that who specialize in your industry, that's another good source. So if you're paying dues to somebody, cash in on them.
John, I would also like to add that Cuyahoga County also has some resources with their Small Business Resource Center. Folks can go to cuyahogacounty.us/help for business.
Okay, thank you. I've got another audience question since we're still here. I am a female-owned business and I'm applying for the EIDL and the SBA loans. Can I also apply for assistance through the MBDC?
I will recommend you to apply for any loan that is on your scope. You never know, just make sure that it's not a predator lender, but any source of lending, look into it, look at their interest, and if it's something that you can get, I will recommend you to apply.
I would support those thoughts entirely. Let's move over a little bit and just talk about reducing expenses. You kind of, if your revenue is going down, you certainly want to look at expense reduction. I'm going to give each one of you kind of a minute to talk about what you think folks should do, and you can be very specific about one point or multiple points, and Kimberly, I'd like to start with you.
Well, naturally, some expenses will, be eliminated or be reduced automatically, just from staff not being in the office. So those will happen naturally. Unfortunately, some of the biggest expense of most companies is their payroll. So unfortunately, some companies have laid off staff, but those who have continued to keep their staff intact will unfortunately, find it difficult to reduce expenses.
No, that's an excellent point. I think it just like anything else, you need to sit down and figure out, all right, if I had to operate with bare bones, what would that look like? And so anything that is something that you could still stay functional with, but didn't necessarily need to survive, needs to get reduced or eliminated at this time, so you can maintain the cash flow and preserve the cash that you have while you're still trying to come up with ideas to, increase your revenue. The reason why I keep saying increase revenue is because we always talk about that bottom line. I mean, the everything up under the bottom line basically, and we don't really think about revenue as much. So I think finding ways to pivot your revenue and your streams and your different revenue avenues is just as important as eliminating and reducing expenses that you don't necessarily need right now.
I think this is a good time to review your P&L and go line by line. Every business is different, and you as the business owner are an expert in your industry. So looking at each of those expense lines, just ask this question: can I do without it? Can I reduce this? What happens if I take this expense? Am I going to be able to continue operating? Or can I adjust these expenses based on the revenue I'm making right now? Remember, this is not the regular time, and reviewing your P&L and reviewing your expenses will make the difference between surviving this time and not. So there's not just one answer for everybody. My recommendation is, right now, we have, unfortunately, we have more time to look at the financials of the business. So take the time to go over your P&L. I have found expenses that my clients have for years that we have been able to eliminate. And so take the time today and go through those lines, through those expenses, and ask that question to yourself. And you are the person you're your own advisor at that point. You can ask that question and make sure that you don't eliminate something that you need, but definitely something that can be reduced, do it.
Okay, so Greg, I want you to tackle this aspect of this part of the discussion and anybody else can chime in here too, and that is, if you have lease obligations or debt repayment obligations, can you go to those institutions and ask them for relief for a period of time?
Yes, absolutely. To agree with George, it's time to take a look at your P&L and look at your expenses, see which ones are fixed and which ones are variable. The variable expenses are maybe things you can cut off on your own, just by saying we don't need to do this anymore. The fixed ones are probably going to be contractual obligations. So if you have a loan or a lease payment or terms with creditors, you want to approach those people and ask for extended terms. And at the same time, tell them what else you're doing, like applying for 7A loan. And if you get relief under the 7A loan, you'll be able to become current again. And in many cases, you'll be able to extend your terms. But in other cases, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. But I would look at the fixed contractual obligations and try to negotiate extended terms, telling the creditor or other lender relationship, that you're doing these other proactive things like applying for 7A loan to get the cash flow back.
So let's talk just a little bit about the balance sheet items then, where can be sources of cash. You know, Kimberly, you being an accountant, and George, you being in that same space, and Jasmine, you being with ECDI, what can people do from a balance sheet perspective to maintain cash? Does anybody want to take the lead?
Well, let's start with the accounts receivable. At this time, that's almost impossible to collect because everybody's trying to keep as much cash as possible. It's something that I mentioned before will apply, which is reducing your inventory. Talk to your supplier and see if they can take that inventory back. And that will help you with reducing inventory and reducing your accounts payable.
What if you're a business that doesn't have inventory, like a service business that you know, may have small stuff they buy, you know, but they really don't have a lot of work in process, raw materials, or, you know, finished goods?
Well, even with the service business, that big printer that you bought and you're not going to be able to use it for a while, take it back.
If only it were that simple. As far as the balance sheet goes, it's obviously, you know, not, you know, paying vendors if you don't have to. So that's a way to leverage, you know, your accounts payable or accrued expenses may increase so that you can hold on to that cash.
What about what should people be doing with payables on their balance sheet on the liability side of the equation?
As I just mentioned, just holding on, like, you know, it's going to increase if you're trying to, you know, monitor your cash flow. You're obviously going to have those payables on your books. They're going to increase as time, you know, passes until you have the money to pay them. And again, it's communicating with, you know, all vendor suppliers, you know, so that they understand, you know, your situation and what you're doing about it.
You want to negotiate this with your creditors so you don't get a bump on your credit rating, because when you start trying to come back, if your credit rating's been downgraded, it's going to be much more difficult to get credit. So the whole point is do it on a negotiation basis. Contact the creditor. Don't have the creditor contact you.
Exactly. That communication piece that we talked about earlier is huge with this. And the thing about this whole thing is that this is a pandemic. And so everyone knows that everyone is dealing with something right now, especially businesses, especially people who possibly may be getting unemployed. So it should be an easy conversation to start.
What are some things that people can do to operate safely in this environment, even though they may not be at their office? I mean, what recommendations would you have? Because operating safely is also, you know, a source of cash down the road, and also preserving your reputation. And I would say, you know, let's just start with the necessary health precautions, right? Make the changes that you need to make in your business by remotely. And should you be sending out messages to your customers saying what you are doing? And would anybody like to take the lead on that?
So I have clients that they're in the service industry, and now Zoom have become one of the main tools that they use. So they do advising, they do consulting, and they have had this opportunity to connect with their clients via video.
Yeah, Zoom and all the other different platforms have really taken off here. I've got a client that does very high quality live streaming, and it's really a very simple plug and play equation. So, you know, really it behooves companies to really travel as minimally as possible, and also to operate remotely on these different platforms. You know, and what do you think about sending, let's say that you're in a business where, you know, you have to interact with customers, right? What do you send to them in terms of communications, letting them know what you're doing? Anybody want to
I think
chime
it's as simple as a newsletter or anything else. Just, I think I think it's two sides to that. I think that you should be able to tell your customers what you're doing to keep them safe. And then you also want to set up expectations for them when they actually come into your place of business, so that they are aware of how you even expect them to conduct themselves, because you're trying to keep yourself safe, your staff safe, and any other customers that you may have safe. So I would, you know, communicate both sides to it when you're contacting your customers about health concerns and staying safe.
Right. And obviously you can communicate via email as far as communicating with your clients, and also teleconferencing. That is a way, you know, to keep that communication line open as well.
Yeah, letting your customers know what the expectations are is very important, as Jasmine pointed out. One good example I saw is that, you know, Giant Eagle is doing a whole lot of work, you know, in terms of come to the curb delivery services, things like that, and keeping the store clean. But they're telling their customers when they come in, they have 7 rules they want them to obey. You know, maintain the 6 feet between people. So if you have a heavy customer flow like a retailer that's still open, you should have your own expectations too. And I've been told, oh, don't bring your reusable bags in anymore, because we'll just give you plastic bags instead. So as Jasmine pointed out, you need to kind of bend and adjust to the process.
And also, I would like to add, if you are a retail business and you have the capability of receiving orders before the customer get in, that's something that you can do. Have your customers send their orders. Your employees can put it together, and they just need to pick it up and pay at the register. So they spend less time at the store.
Okay, so good. Go ahead, Greg.
The more you can do by appointment process, you know, to limit travel. PNC says, well, our branches are closed, but the drive-throughs are open because that reduces contact. But they're saying, if you need to sign loan papers, you need to get in your safe deposit box, call, and we'll make a special appointment. We'll make special arrangements for you to come into the facility. So it's almost, you almost have to train your customers a little bit to observe these factors and to make sure that they're conducting business with you safely as you conduct business with them safely also.
Okay, we've got a question. Somebody would like to understand the terminology, extending the runway. Jasmine, do you want to take a lead on that and kind of explain what your view of extending the runway is, and then we can all go through it, because it can mean different things to different people. But basically,
yeah, that's true.
Making sure you have enough cash on hand to operate your business for X period of time.
That's exactly all I was gonna say. Yeah, it's how long can you stretch the dollars that you have, and coming up with a strategy. I think that is really important for us to think about, and it's hard to say like the length of time that we may be in this situation, because that's just as big as part of your strategy as anything else. But yeah, basically that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yes.
Very good.
Well, your runway is your cash.
Say that again, George.
Technically, your runway is your cash.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's right. Typically a business will settle into a burn rate, if you will. You know, that's a negative cash burn every month, and you know, you want to figure out what in this situation your negative cash might be, and then you can divide that into your cash on hand, and that will give you your months of runway. So that's That's really and we want to try to extend this so you want to minimize that burn that you're experiencing. And that's why we've gone over what can you do from a revenue standpoint, what can you go do from an expense standpoint, which is your P&L, and what you can do from a balance sheet standpoint.
I look at it as extending your landing strip as opposed to your runway. I'm a contrarian, okay, you know, but yeah, you need to, you know, make sure, you know, what they call a landing of an airplane is a controlled crash, and any crash you can walk away from is a good one. So as George mentioned, you know, if you can extend your cash flows from what historically would have been 3 months to 6 months, that's extending your landing strip. And that's, I agree totally with George, is you got to look at, you know, and we've talked about a lot of these processes, talking to your creditors, getting loans, things like that. That's all going to extend the life of your business and hopefully make sure that your business is maintained through this crisis.
And I would like to add, unfortunately, the business that will survive this emergency are the ones that plan and not just react, but they act. So this is a good time to analyze and see where you are and plan and see how you can expand your cash flow. So we have at the Hispanic Business Center, we have Advisor, we have Score, we have Jumpstart, that you have resources that you can use to help you analyze those reports and things that I'm a business owner as well, things that we neglect doing because we enjoy operating the business but not looking at the numbers. Well, this is the time to spend time and really understand your business and your financials. That will make the difference between surviving or not making it.
Yeah, the interesting part about this is that I'm at ECDI, I teach a lot of training classes, things like that, and I'm always stuffing finance down everybody's throat. And because it's just so important to have a handle on that. And like, there's really no silver lining to this situation, but I think that this gives everyone opportunity to sit down and actually learn what these things are, the things that their accountants are talking to them about on a regular basis. This is your time to sit there and learn these things. It's going to make you a better business owner.
Jasmine, I agree with you 100%.
So what the comments that were just made are perfect for launching into what are we advising businesses to do from a planning perspective. So not just dealing with the here and now, but you know, you want to plan short term because we're in this situation. But I think we all agree that we don't know how long it's going to be like this, but that at some point it will end, as you know, prior pandemics have shown us. You know, you've got to be planning the short term. So that's looking at these P&L items, you know, the balance sheet issues, raising money, applying for these loans. What about the longer term plan? You know, when this is over, what do you know, are you looking at distribution of work? Are you looking at what is the disruption in your workplace going to look like? I mean, this is a subject I think is really open and we can all kind of have some input on. So you know, let's give us our audience some examples of the things that we can be doing from a long range planning perspective.
Well, Greg here. I think that during this period of time, we're going to have to strengthen our relationships with our customers, our bankers, our accountants, our investors, our suppliers. And once we've done that, once we get through this, don't let those strengthened relationships weaken. Keep them intact, keep them in place, keep the lines of communication open after the business survives. And then if there's a future situation, you'll have increased confidence with your customer base, your supplier base, your bankers, your accountants, and other outside parties and investors. So, you know, once the lesson will be learned from this is we're going to find new business techniques that are going to improve the quality of our business and the quality of our relationship with our customers and suppliers. Don't let it go after that. Keep maintaining.
And John, as I mentioned when we first started, the business continuity plan. So that's something that all businesses should be looking at. You know, what are the essential jobs? What do you need to operate in times like this? You know, what staff are considered essential? Are you cross-training staff so that if, you know, certain staff are sick, they're unable to work, even telecommuting, working from home, then, you know, you have others that can step in into those roles as necessary.
And we have experienced clients that were skeptical about technology, and now this is their main way to communicate with clients. And I can see this. This is a lesson that we all are learning. In times of crisis, we brainstorm harder. We are used to the way that we operate, and during this time, I have seen so many good ideas from clients that they have incorporated right now, and 2 months ago, they never thought about. So let's continue brainstorming, look at your business and look at ways that you can improve and do a better business.
I think that's an excellent point. I think that people also need to think about, as just like you are starting to take things down and scaling things down, when this is all over, now you have to think about scaling it up. Don't just jump in, because we don't know how this is going to look. So paying attention to how many customers actually come back, and paying attention to how much your revenue is going up, scale it. Things may not go exactly how they were before all of this. Just position yourself to slowly build back up and start bringing more employees back. Like, I think it has to be a transitional thing.
One other point is, you know, we are all feeling a lot more mortal now, but if you're a small business, you should have in place either a management succession plan or an exit strategy. Not saying you have to exercise either one of them, but it's something that this will bring to light. Geez, if I really got sick and I have to be ventilated for a month, what's going to happen to my business? So you need to look at sort of contingency plans in case someone is ill, and those contingency plans can survive the COVID-19 virus situation and help your company be better prepared for those types of strategies in the future.
So Jasmine, you mentioned about scaling back up. So when this thing is over, what do we think it's going to look like? I mean, I don't think people's businesses are just going to snap back on. Is it going to be gradual? Is it going to be something that is quick? And I'm sure there's going to be differences between different kinds of businesses, but what are your thoughts on that?
I really think it's going to be gradual. I think you have to put yourself in the mind of a customer, especially people who may be fearful of certain things. And I think that it's going to be there are people who originally didn't do delivery. They strictly went to the grocery store. And then next thing you know, they're going to be delivering more. And then they're going to, after a while, they see that's safe. And then they may go out and do this. And then they may go out and do that. It's going to be gradual. And I think that, everyone needs to be prepared and not have that thinking. Like a lot of us entrepreneurs are like that. Like, okay, the optimism is really high with entrepreneurship. And you got to be more realistic about how things actually may go and put it in the mindset of the customer.
If you could think on your feet or in your chair about the one key thing you'd like to leave with the audience today, and then we'll wrap it up. And I'm going to give us about a 10-second start here, and then I'm going to ask one of you to do so. So think about that for a second. As you're thinking about that, I want to say to our audience that, the mental health or the state of the entrepreneurs or business owners is really critical here. And it's super important to be very supportive. That's a part of keeping your business going. Leadership is really an important thing today. So exercise all that and, be considerate. So, all right, Greg, I'm going to start with you. What is the one key takeaway you'd like to leave the audience with?
Thanks for picking on me first. The one key thing I would keep out, and I've seen this actually happen in a business relationship I had before, communicate, communicate, communicate. Because anything that you leave your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your banker, your accountant, if they don't know what's happening with you, then they're going to think the worst possible case, and rumors will overtake you. So my suggestion is make sure you communicate with all your critical business partners.
Kimberly?
I would like to say, to folks to take this as an opportunity. Change brings about change. And as we go through times like this, you have to think about, the changes you need to make in your life, in your business, and what makes sense. Again, a time of reflection, and just, try to look at the positive side of this, even though it's unfortunate for many.
George?
Well, we mentioned when things go back to normal. I don't think normal is going to be normal again. We just need to adjust. We are learning different ways of doing business. And the more we adapt and the more we adjust, the better equipped we will be for the future.
Jasmine?
Well, I'm a natural strategist. So I think that you should think about every pocket of your business, and you should have a strategy in place about worst and best case scenarios, just so that you are planning, but with a goal in mind. If your goal is to, minimize the amount of expenses that you have to carry for the next, blah, blah, couple, whatever months, sit down and come up with a serious plan that's going to align with the goals that you have to reach in every part of your business, as it relates to your employees, as it relates to your customers, as it relates to your money, all the things that keep your business operational. Come up with a strategy in each area.
All right. Thank you for those comments. I want to thank each one of you for participating today and joining our conversation, and thank the audience for taking the time to listen. There are definitely resources out there that can be reached out to. May you all be happy on this sunny day given the current circumstances. Talk to you soon.